welcome. This session is the collaborative writing retreat, and in it Karin Murris invites the participants to return to their own writing. But before that, the session starts with an inquiry about the paper InfantMethodologies, which was provided for the session. It's great if you can have read it beforehand, but not essential. We'll be dipping into the article as the session unfolds.
The piece that really resonated with me was about the long live the enfant terrible, because of this phrase about a series of now. And I loved the way that, you really had the sense of babies there in the reading, their noises, and their kind of wonderful unpredictability and presence. So yeah, I really strongly responded to that particular piece by I can't remember the first name, Nordstrom. I should probably know.
Yeah, Susan Nordstrom. Yeah,
and it's it's helpful for me. I'm working with somebody just now who's a PhD student at Bristol, Lois, who comes along to our Adventures in Posthumanism group. And we've been doing slow writing together for quite a while through conversations and reading things together about intragenerational encounters, and trying to figure out what we're not happy with in what's already out there, and how to articulate some of these things. And I think this paper will be very, very helpful for us. Yeah.
I'm just looking at it. I don't know whether anyone else would like to respond as well, but I love the last sentence, which says, perhaps only when adults can be made soft by the birthing canal of a series of nows can we then begin to articulate what infant inquiry might become. I really thought that it's almost very visual, but also very, very tactile. Beautiful. I really like that. Okay, thank you. And yeah, you're Joanna. So who can connect with that?
I can connect with that because I was looking at the way the paper is written, such wildly diverse sort of ideas coming from many different quarters. And I just thought that it sort of reminded me a bit of montage writing, where, you're just putting things out there, but there's no conclusion and there's no sort of orientation, but they're just there for people to make of them, what they can and what they want to, and they don't necessarily talk to each other. So I found that quite interesting, and you pick up little nuggets that appeal in a number of the pieces, so I was quite interested in the Deligny one of the spider, because I've been reading about spiders. I've just had to review a paper on spiderly practices and webbing, so I was quite interested in that. And then I was Maria Puig de la Bella Casa also caught my eye, the care, and those are what I can think of without looking back at the paper.
Which one was the one with the spider?
Deligny. Let me just see.
Oh yes, I like that one. Yeah.
It's Gail Bolt.
It's Gail Bolt.
Deligny and the Imminence of Infancy. So Chantal has wrote, I don't know if you saw it, Karin, in the book on posthuman think it was the book on socially just pedagogies or something, where she had a lot of those delineate mappings. What he did is he mapped autistic children and where they walked, and followed them rather than imposing anything. And I sort of like the alternative to psychoanalysis that he's offering.
Yeah.
Can I jump?
Thank you,
Are you
Viv.
connect? Viv?
Yeah.
Karin,
You want to
yeah.
connect with Viv, shall?
Yeah, because I think the most argument that showing my body is the political strategy that think and produce collectively. And for me, it's okay. There's some difference between the researchers, but if you look at all the paper, not just looking which each researcher says about the infantile methodologies, we see a movement of distraction with child. Then my question to you, Karin, and to others, how was this process? What you affected with the work with different researchers and writing this paper? How this movement affect your way of thinking about your working? And maybe this is very helpful for us. Huh?
I mean, this is a question. Let me get this right. Is how does this is a question for everyone? Yeah, when you've read this, how does it affect your writing? By actually, and it was one of the authors as well, is saying about infant, child, baby. How, but actually foregrounding that, how does that make you? How does it affect your research, right? Is that your question?
Yeah, and way of you thinking and way of you see of this.
But you're not expecting an answer, right?
Just a movement, and I just put a little store in this holiday with my family. I have a cousin with 2 years old, and he said for me, "Oh, I think the advertisement in YouTube videos is so sad because nobody wants to see this advertisement." And for me, this was very, very powerful because I never think about this. And he said, "Oh, I think the advertisement is so sad. It's so sad because nobody wants to see." Just a history. When I read this paper, I remember. Wonderful. 2 years old.
Yeah. Okay. Xiao, what might be helpful is if you can put that question in the chat so we won't forget it. The way you formulate it as well is lovely. And it's the movement, because pieces like this always really inspire me to diffract, to diffract these pieces through one another and see what it produces and how it differentiates. Yeah. Jane?
Hi, yeah. My point really builds on Viv's point, actually, which is about the organisation of the paper. And what I was struck by is I agree to an extent that it's there almost as a dip in, dip out, and the kind of bite-sizedness of the entries mean that you can kind of wander around and delve in as you like. But I wondered how the editors arrived at the structure that they did, and whether a kind of infant methodology was kind of guiding. So if we think about the child who's maybe crawling or coasting and falling and stumbling and rolling and tripping and rolling around on their back and then having a snooze, and you know, whether or not that could have been or was you know, a guiding principle about how to curate this kind of collection of entries. So is there a way to materialise your methodology in the structuring and the curation of your written work, I suppose is what I'm thinking, and is that possible in a collection? I know it's probably more possible if you're authoring a paper and you've got that space to play with texture, form, but could there have been, or was it not considered? I don't know. I'm just curious about, you know, the infant methodology as a methodology for writing and organising and curating writing.
Yeah, Jane, and I suppose what are you also saying, what has gone lost or could have been made more strongly the case? So it doesn't have to be an either or, you know, you can still have these bite sizes, but then something else is happening maybe at the end, because I think those three pieces, they were sort of a review, they were a commentary on what had been written, but it feels as if they themselves are almost new papers, some of them, or not papers, but pieces, introducing new ideas as well. So, and I think the question, it asks the question about, is that post-qualitative research? You know, that kind of bite size, we don't want a linear structure, no kind of overall logic. Is that so?
I suppose what I was the kind of weaving and the threading and the returning and the composting, and you know, that kind of aerating, whereas they're kind of presented as maybe more like children's building blocks, or I don't know, there was a kind of orderliness to it that seemed to defy an infant methodology, if you see what I mean.
Aha, okay, so that's a different point and I thought you were making. Yeah. Anyone who would like, I think Teresa, do you want to come back to that? But Xiao, did you ask where the paper is? It's no. If we look at all paper, oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, Teresa? And then maybe that's also your way of introducing yourself.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Teresa. I'm based in Johannesburg at University of Witwatersrand. Yeah, I'm interested in arts-based methodologies and Reggio Emilia, and so I've been working with quite a few people in the room here, and reading the article, you know, encountering authors that I've read before. So that whole that idea of inviting this group, this crowd of people to contribute something, and then this added thing, as you say, Karin, the time that's visible in the paper, where there's layers of, you know, the invitation, obviously the people writing, and then there's this other process of other people reading and then writing about the paper. So that was quite unusual, and I like that. I think that it is really good for stimulating conversation, because maybe there are so many threads that are, they're short, such short pieces and quite different, and so that it kind of invites more of the turning, the returning, as Jane is saying. It kind of needs more cutting up and, yeah, mixing up. I don't know. We can do it though. It's
lovely you say that, because I was even thinking that it begs almost, you know, to get the scissors and to start cutting and to play with it and to move it around, and yeah, which of course we can do, right?
Or to have it on, you know, some sort of platform like Padlet, where you can move these bits around, or like Prezi, you know, where you can kind of zoom in and zoom out, and then they read through each other. So it just seemed to be needed a more childlike kind of haptic unpredictability, rather than this kind of quite static. Yeah, maybe that's just me. I don't know how you achieve that either, but I guess that's, you know, what post-qualitative experimentation is kind of gesturing towards.
Okay, who can connect? Yeah, Roseanne?
I also, I suppose when you think about collaborative writing and I'm getting, I suppose nervous because it's writing. I mean, I'm talking about the affect, right, of what it is that this presentation, what we were doing today was going to be doing, and then this paper. So I'm thinking through all these things. I didn't read all of them. I read a couple of them and drawn to particular people, but I was drawn to the impossibilities of Zooming with babies, because I think of adult and child always in relation, and all I could think was the impossibility of Zooming with adults, because why can't we be at a slant? Like she says, sometimes the baby moves and the phone lies at an angle and I see the whole room at a slant, which is so much more honest than what we're doing here today. And in a way, I'm not saying the paper's dishonest, but I mean, I'm not saying dishonest, obviously. It's about convention, I suppose, that we have to be in this block. Like I could actually be center the human and start talking to you from over here. And then people may ask, are you okay? Can you get back into the center? Why are we all in the center of the screen? Can't I be here or whatever? Or I was thinking I want to lie down for this presentation on my tummy. Anyway, so just thinking like, yeah, and I mean, I'm thinking about it. Exactly. Thank you, Teresa. Or like, if that was like that, I'd be. Thank you, Samaya. So just the honesty that, also the most important part of this page. I mean, I have some, yesterday we spoke about that in Teresa and Karin's, in Karin's book and Teresa's example of the sapling, that data is never separated from the researcher. And the last page, last sentence is, how has my knowing changed when I encounter the impossibility of knowing this baby? So just really thinking all the time what it means to know and not know. And then also in these pieces that are very much like we are in these little blocks. Are the pieces talking? Are they not? How do we make them more like, you know, can I touch the people next to me? Anyway, but yeah, it just gave me lots to think about. There was a lot to provoke in terms of, I suppose what Jane was saying too. I think it's a bit static, you know, like where's the image? So yeah, and just the impossibility of Zooming with adults is staying with me. It's confronts me every single time I do a seminar and I'm in a Zoom room, and that I struggle with the inauthenticity that I project even. Thanks.
Just a quick comment about, you said it's a collaborative piece, and you know, and I think it's important in terms of methodology, what would make a piece of writing collaborative and what would make it, it actually refers to a collective piece, a collective paper. And in what way is that different? And it will be interesting to hear actually from you reading this and being introduced to it, what your impression was in terms of that, of it being a collective or of it being collaborative. And what is that difference and why does that matter? Or is all writing collaborative anyway with the modern human in lots of ways?
Sorry, Karin, so I was saying, you know, collaborative is on the program for today. And are you saying that this is a collective piece?
It says in the beginning, yeah.
So, well, but yeah, I had another thought about that, but sorry, no, you're not asking me, but.
I mean, I'm interested in collaborative writing.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, yeah, I would also say it was more collective than.
But also we are a collective, right? The post-qualitative research collective. Well.
Call it a collective, Karin. We just thought of that name, right?
Yeah,
I'm
But
wondering.
so if we want to be a collective or are a collective, when we write collectively, you know, what way is it different from collaboratively? Or isn't it different? And anyway, I think, yeah, lovely, Marie. And that's a nice way as well for you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Roseanne. Just following your comments there. I haven't read the paper in its entirety, to be absolutely honest. I came to this session, Joanna reminded me, and this paper's been sat on my desk for a little while, and so has the big metaphorical pile of marking that I have to do. And I thought, oh, sod it, I'm coming. Here I am. And I'm shifting to trying to prioritise writing and scholarly activity in my life over everything else that has to be done. So here I am. I'm currently trying to do some work around grandparenting. My work has, sorry, cat is tormenting me, I've previously looked at parenting and wanted to shift what is happening with grandparenting in relation to changing demographics of parents becoming older. So that's the sort of focus that I'm at the moment, and I did become a grandparent over the pandemic, so I've been encountering this not knowing and unknowing, and the impossibility of knowing this little person through Zoom, and so that those sorts of things have sort of really stood out for me here, and in relation to my own work and this idea of the impossibility of knowing. And connection to productivity, I find a little bit problematic, because who benefits in terms of knowing within that sort of language? So yeah, so here I am. I'm really looking forward to the conversations around this paper, and how it might relate to my support with students who are trying to get to know little people, my PhD students, in post-qualitative ways.
And you're also Plymouth, yeah?
I am, yes, I'm in Plymouth, yes.
Yeah. And Joanna is also, for people who don't know Joanna, yeah. Okay, who can connect with that? With a stretch? We're all connected one way or another, and that's what we've said. Joanna, you want to come in?
Yeah, I'm really happy that Marie's here, because I was reading the paper this morning and thinking of her and some of the lovely work that she's done. And I just thought, oh, I just really want her to be here. So I'm so glad that you kind of, decided to make that priority. And I would wholeheartedly kind of applaud that. So that's really important to say. And that last comment you make fascinates me, Marie, about connecting the impossibility of knowing with productivity, and your own situation of these piles on the desk, and, you know, this longing actually to be much closer, if you like, to the child, to the infant, to the baby. Just comes through really strongly, and how somehow each of us in these little blocks is kind of then operating in a sort of in the sky somehow, and not enough down on the floor, on the ground. I mean, I think that's generally a problem for me increasingly when I read academic writing. It's kind of and including in this paper, you know, where are these babies? You know, where can we feel them? Where can we kind of sense their presence? And, you know, I do find that very, very troubling. You know, the kind of falling back into what's called theorizing, that it, you know, is always seems to become an abstraction. I hope I'm not sounding too ranty here. I feel slightly ranty. But also I was glad of Marie referring to grandparenting in connection with this paper, because I think, you know, there are almost lots of new spaces, places, relations, interactions to look, you know, because I suppose some interesting stuff is happening there. I didn't have the feeling of this paper being collaborative and dialogical. It isn't a shared inquiry, I don't think. So, you know, community of inquiry practice springs to mind in terms of how you get writing, if you like, that sort of comes out of people coming together, sharing, kind of not really knowing what belongs to who. I think Karin and I often say that in the collaborative writing that we've done, you know, did you say that? Did I say that? Where did that come from? And actually, you know, it's quite hard work developing that kind of collaboration, because it's so at odds with the individualism that we're kind of trained into.
Yeah, and the very fact of co-writing, knowing that there is the other, carefully chosen other, who will just be a sounding board, but also, you know, you can take risks. So actually what comes out of your pen or your fingers is already different by the very fact that it's collaborative. And Jane has put in the chat that it's, for her, is a collection, not a collective. I don't know, what do you want to say more about that, Jane?
Yeah, I guess it just strikes me that just to kind of totally concur with the points that have already been made, that, you know, it seemed to me to have been a collection of contributions that have been assembled in a fairly linear fashion on the idea or the concept or the practice of an infant methodology, but not the collaborative practice of maybe thinking with infant methodology as a writing collaborative inquiry and kind of process. That's how it feels to me. So I would, a better or a more apt description from the way I'm engaging with it is that it's a collection rather than a collective, and I certainly don't sense a collaboration, maybe amongst the editors in their initial vision, but the contributing parts, their contributions, it's a collection of contributions. To my mind, that's how it appears. And then I think just Joanna's point about when you co-write or you collaborate and the coming together of ideas, and you can't trace or track where they came from, when they appeared, how they emerged, and how they kind of almost have a life of their own. And that's the fun part from my perspective of collaborating, is you don't know what's coming, and that's where I think playing with the structure and the processes in writing in a collaborative way can bring about these surprises. You put together an abstract which gives some sense, and often, you know, you get to the end of a collaborative piece of writing and you have to rewrite the abstract because it's taken on a life of its own, and it's kind of, it came from a place, and where it's gone and then what it does, it may be still doing the same work, but you haven't gone through the same processes that you imagined that you might do. And that I think is the fun part. We were talking yesterday about, you know, fun in post-qualitative approaches, and I think, you know, that really is collaborative working, is where the surprises come, and you're pushed out of your way of doing things and confronted with the challenges of negotiating and being open, which is, it's generative but really uncomfortable often, I think.
I think Roseanne was first, is that right, when it comes up that way? And then Teresa?
I think it was Teresa, Karen.
Ah, so it goes from the left to the right. I wasn't sure about the technology. Roseanne,
okay.
sorry, Teresa.
Thanks. Yeah, I was thinking about well, what Jane has been saying about this collaborative writing experience and the you know, things taking on a life of their own, things writing themselves. It's only possible really if you let something else in. And I think just thinking about the way we were doing the inquiry yesterday, the allowing, you know, objects and materials and you know, we kind of played with stuff. And I know, you know, unfortunately with the pandemic, we're getting better and better at these distanced engagements. And maybe they bring something particular with them, but the actual kind of collaborative playing, I think is a different way, and maybe more infant-like in terms of the sensory kind of space that you allow, and that's when you really things emerge, and you can't really pin them to one author because they're events, then yeah, they happen. So I don't know what that says about where we're all going in terms of our teaching and, you know, being pushed into blended learning, and how do we make sure we don't lose those different ways of collaborating. Yeah.
Thank you. Roseanne?
Actually, it completely connects with what Teresa was, we had a quick fight, and completely connects with what Teresa is saying, because I did want to ask to clarify in this room today, what you were saying, what Joanna was saying is, you know, it seems like we're talking about collaboration as if it's only about the human. And I mean, I'm not, and I know that Teresa just explained that more articulately, but that's what was wondering about, even in all these, I mean, obviously with respect, reading these pieces, and I haven't done enough work around all of them, but how do we, even if it is a collection, the collaboration is not with the data, for example, the babies, how were they collaborating in this, you know, how do we show what that means? And Joanna articulated and said, why is theorizing always in abstraction? But then we almost make that, we allow that other thing to happen because it's theorizing. So we say, okay, because it's theorizing, we don't have to make the effort to show the more than human in this piece. And so that's, and again, that for me, I'm grappling like my yearning is to, I mean, I've just finished writing this, I finished writing my PhD, trying to show writing with the children, writing with the materials, and how do I continue to do that? Yeah.
So when you're saying, just to clarify, when you say, you know, in these abstractions, what is just sort of dropped out is the more than human, or the collaboration with the more than human. But do you also mean with the less human, or the not fully human, that is child? Yeah.
Yeah, you sort of do. I do sort of wonder, do they make the pieces short? Because, you know, no. You know, yeah. I mean, I was wondering about that. Shouldn't they be really long pieces on infant methodologies? What's that about? But also, Karen, when we think about disrupting the theory practice divide, you know, that's what we've been trying to do and work on. And I know this. I mean, not every piece can do all of that. But it was more the point about when we talk about collaboration, is it just about the humans we're talking about, and what else are we responsible to? And I know we can't always be responsible to or care, but how are we going to be responsible to that which we love? So, yeah.
Thank you. Jose, and it's also a way of introducing yourself.
Hi, I'm from Peru, so English is not my mother tongue, so I will do my best. I kept wondering about if this paper is collective or not, in which ways, and what it makes a paper collective. Because usually a collective paper that is written in, I don't know, in 4, 6, or 8 hands, it's difficult to distinguish the voices, who's writing that idea or that other, even when it is evident that there are a multiplicity of voices. So this, I don't know, impossibility of recognition of an individual voice, and I think it maybe is that gives that sense of collective, right? But in the other hand, in this paper, there are like different parts with different authors, and maybe it is kind of different of the usual collective papers. And I think that that idea of collections, it maybe describes good the the paper, but I don't know if a collection it's not, it not can be also collective. I think maybe a collection can be also a collective work, right? And I was thinking that this paper is like a collection of fragments, like maybe I was wondering mm, what could be the power of fragmentary writing and research. And that's all. Thank you.
Wow, that's all. That's a wonderful question. If you wouldn't mind putting that also in the chat, you know, the power of fragmentary writing. What is the power? That would be very helpful. Fantastic. Thank you. We've got a couple of people who haven't introduced themselves. And of course, it could be about anything about this paper. It could be about any of the content or an idea that you particularly liked or didn't like, or doesn't have to connect. Got Louis. Oh, shame. Andre? Can you hear us, Andre? Okay. I suggest then, well, we've got to, you want to come back in, Jose, or you still got your hand up? Is it a new hand or is it an old hand?
Yeah, no, sorry.
Okay, so maybe we can take another 10 minutes or so. So we've got an hour for actually just exploring some of the aspects of what it does. Maybe Joanna, can you say a little bit more about what excited you so much? I think I sent it to you and I was very excited about parts of it. And then and then you got excited, I'm not quite sure. And then Sumaya. And then you sent it on to Marie, got excited about it. So let's see what people are excited about here. That's always very nice.
Well, I think it does really follow what we've been exploring together here about, you know, the possibilities of a process that is a childlike collaboration in writing, and the you know, what is offered here and what else then. I think I am really struggling, as I said earlier, with a kind of a search, I guess, for ways of writing that do justice, if you like, to childlikeness, for want of a better term, and kind of address and really kind of are focusing on things that matter, and that can draw others in. I mean, to me, this is, you know, as you know, I just keep coming back, I suppose, to the political, and, you know, my worries about all the things that are going wrong, especially for children, I guess. I come back to that again and again, the sort of level of injustices done there. So there's a lot, but some of it is to do with finding other forms of theorizing that are opening out, that are inviting in. And I just, you quoted in your piece, Karin, a couple of what you describe as a poetic sentence from the Barad and Gerndorfer piece, which I pasted into the chat, which is this idea of walking around in concepts, but it's very much linked to storying or stories. And I wondered if that resonated with anyone else, and whether thinking through that, those words, eating those words, chewing those words, tasting those words, like we were talking about yesterday, is something worth thinking about some more together.
Yeah, what was interesting for me when I was asked to write this was, and until it was published, I had no idea what else was written, right? So was how I returned to Derrida, actually, in that. And why is that so significant? Because actually we had a particular take on that particular article in some collaborative writing that we did. And then as I returned to it, I actually read it very differently. But yeah, so you're inviting us to look at this one.
I think it's further down.
Oh yeah. A childlike deconstruction of concepts has little to do with age, although adults can learn a lot about how to philosophize from infants who are in the process of acquiring language. As Barad puts it poetically, you can walk around in concepts. I walk around in a sentence, I walk around in a word, or even a letter, until stories, different stories. And then this is, I suppose, also connects with what Roseanne was saying about the responding and allowing to respond. Responsible science and philosophy enable the other to respond and to make a difference. And what you're saying is, you know, maybe that we're not doing that enough, not even in this paper, right? I mean, I think here this is very much inspired by, for people who don't know, philosophy for children as a pedagogy, because it is this lovely idea about coming to concepts as if we're thinking about them for the very first time. And I think that that is a childlike way, you know, in the sense of not already taken for granted the way we use concepts and coming to them afresh all the time, including the concept infant. Yeah. So when you're talking about child and infant, Joanna, how, you know, the difficulty of what we are referring to, you know, does it signify this fleshy being in space and time, chronological time, as what Walter is talking about, as also something that's to disrupt? Or is it that when we talk about infant methodology, how child as method makes us work differently, and also how the kind of invisibility in terms of whenever people refer to indigenous methodologies or decolonizing methodologies, that we're actually forgetting child or childlike ways of becoming in the world.
I want to add in coming to the concept of concept afresh.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that whole idea of the deconstruction could be childlike, which is actually what Derrida says, you know. If we need an adult authority to okay, let's have a look. I'll stop sharing. Any thoughts anywhere where we can take this?
I think
something in chat. Yeah.
What struck me there is not just deconstructing, but reconstructing and reconceptualizing from within those perspectives, in terms of the creation of new concepts or ways of seeing the world that hasn't been encountered with a novelty of a newborn, but also the realization that it isn't new. They come with children. Babies are so worldly and wise, even though they've they've just arrived, but they haven't just arrived. You know, I don't know. And that is a deep unknowing that I know nothing about, but I don't think many people do. But I've certainly looked. I used to be a midwife, by the way. I've certainly looked into the eyes of little babies and thought, you've definitely been here before.
And they looked at you and they thought the same.
Yeah.
I mean, is there, I'm just thinking of, it's half past away, or almost half past away forward. Is there one particular entry that really struck you? Because I was very taken by the babyography. There were 2 on babies, and there were some moments like, oh yes, you know, oh, I hadn't thought of that, on the ones on babies, and somehow for me the babies worked better than infants, because infant almost bring you to the, you know, start, and you're almost drawn into the conceptual, right? Infants and without language, and is that what we mean? But babies almost immediately do something else, and I haven't come across that. And I love the one on Zoom, you know, babies, and sort of, so I can almost see these researchers thinking and working with, oh my, wow, oh, something else is happening here. This is really productive, rather than this is disrupting the way I normally see research, right? And so maybe if people, I mean, perhaps some of you say, okay, well, I always think that inquiry is really helpful as a kind of, I wouldn't say warm up, but it provokes me into writing. I find it really hard to write just out of the blue. But some of you might well say, oh, you know, I prefer to just turn off the camera, and I prefer to just do some writing now, but perhaps some of us might want to pick up some of these pieces and do some further thinking together. Well, what do you think? What would you like to do?
I want to carry on talking about babies.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. What do other people want to do? Want some writing, or
I would love
or
to do some
perhaps
writing. Sorry, Ken.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ken. And I
Yeah.
must, the paper does do something quite provocative. I know you keep using that word, but about writing, you know, so there's something that's happening anyway. I mean, we spent the last hour talking about that. Sorry, that's not entirely not obvious. But anyway, I'd like to do some writing, but I wouldn't mind talking as well, because that's also something I enjoy. But
okay, so maybe what you can do is start writing and then leave your sound on, and when you're just, it calls you into participating, then you come back. I mean, what I suggest is that we'll just leave the camera on. People can just turn off their camera, obviously, and also their sound, and then people can just continue with just reading some of those pieces and discussing them. And at some point we might agree a time where we just touch base. What do you think? This is what we often do. I always find it very productive. Yeah, maybe we finish at 4, is that right? South African time. So shall we touch base at about 5:30? So in an hour's time. How does that sound? Yeah. And so people who want to hang out with the babies, we can continue with that, and others go and do their own thing. And also the ones who hang out with the babies at any time, just go and, you know, wander off to another corner of the room. Okay, lovely. So, and the recording stays on, if that's okay with you. And it is only for people who are actually registered. We've got 110, I think, registered now for this seminar. But it's not sort of going onto Facebook or anything else. It's just for the people who are registered. Right. Marie, can I maybe ask you to choose a text on babies? There are, I think, 2 on there. I think your mic is off.
Such is life. I haven't read the babyographies.
Okay, we can read that. Oh, Viv, before I forget, did you have your hand up at some point?
No, I didn't.
Okay, no problem. So what shall we do? The babyography? You haven't read that? Maybe it's a good reason.
We can read it.
I have read the Zooming babies.
Shall we start with that one?
Mm-hmm.
It's a fab one. Okay. Oh, that's not working. Ugh. Let me just have a look. Stop sharing. Unless someone else really has got it to hand. Got too many things open.
I do have it to hand, but okay.
Lovely, thank you. Joanna, brilliant.
Which section do we want to start with, Marie?
It was the one on the Zoom and babies.
Yeah.
So that's higher up, I think.
Can you remember the name of the?
Maybe search for Manchester.
Let's go up.
It's the Manchester crowd.
'Tis the Manchester crowd.
Here we are.
No, sorry, it's another one. Yeah, there we are. Shall we read it out loud? Take turns. It's called, what is it called?
The impossibilities of Zooming with babies.
Yeah, it's not this one, Joanna.
Okay, sorry.
It's also interesting, that one.
Here we are.
There it is. I find it quite bewildering, actually, reading it all the way in one go. Okay. Yeah, who wouldn't mind starting to read it out loud?
Okay.
Thanks, Teresa.
The impossibilities of Zooming with babies. We see the babies in momentary sweeps of the phone, or as they move their bodies into the periphery of the screen. As a mum tells us a story of her day, the baby's hand stretches out to the ceiling and stays in the center of the shot, fingers splayed, a solid silhouette. Sometimes the weight of their bodies and the movements they make in their mum's arms causes moments of juggling, shifting, and rearranging of baby and phone, so that the baby lies at an angle, so that the phone lies at an angle, and I see the whole room on a slant. Field notes. Boycott Garnet, January 2021. Should I carry on?
Yes.
Babies,
Yes.
babies have always presented a challenge to traditional methodologies, disrupting assumptions about communication, rationality, and agency that undergird qualitative methodology. Elwickenow and et al. Suggest babies show us that we cannot fully know them. We are forced to confront the impossibility of knowing. Likewise, for Canella and Viruru, working with Glissant's concept of opacity, this impossibility of knowing is productive. This last year, Boycott Garnet, first author, moved some of her fieldwork, intended to be with parents and babies at a playgroup in Northern England, onto Zoom. During these sessions, babies were frequently present but out of shot, glimpsed as movement or sound on the other side of the screen. Zoom, as a tool for communication, set up for speaking subject in the middle of the screen, for a speaking subject in the middle of the screen. Babies' bodies, movements, and sounds exceed the boundaries of the Zoom screen while altering what the researcher can see. Video has long played a central role in educational research, De Freitas, 2016, and particularly in conceptualizing the developing infant by, quote, shaping the narrative of unilinear progress from immaturity to maturity, McRae, 2019. Scholars have productively experimented with video to disrupt habitual assumptions about childhood through, for example, slow motion video, McRae, or film shot from unexpected angles. However, fieldwork over Zoom brings into sharp relief our habitual thinking in assuming we need to create visual material of infants in order to shift these habits. While doing in-person fieldwork as a multisensory experience beyond vision, we still tend to create field notes or visual materials based on what we perceive and can make sense of. In that sense, the field is a site of extraction of meaning, but at the same time, it is also a site of production through the encounter, through us being there. As a virtual field site, Zoom undercuts the ethnographic authority of authentic being there and perceiving whilst there. Babies' momentary movements in and out of the field of vision resist meaning interpretation and displace the site of encounter. Perhaps this contributes to the discomfort we feel as ethnographic researchers on Zoom. Added to this displacement, the researchers might encounter the baby, but the baby might not encounter the researcher. Such research can never be about knowing babies, but rather asking, how is my knowing changed when I encounter the impossibility of knowing this baby?
Wow. Any questions or comments?
Is this just on Zoom? I mean, isn't this in the real? I don't want to fall into those dichotomies of the virtual and the real, but isn't this an issue anyway? How is my knowing changed when I encounter the impossibility of knowing this baby?
Yeah, so this particular research subject, a baby, actually provokes thinking about how we might take that for granted all the time. Xiao?
We can taste a little about this question, yeah. And just go back for yesterday, or because when I took in my knowing, and my knowing in this space is academic knowing, because you are research with babies. I think we forget a lot of other actions, and this is the first disruption, or first question. And when they said, when I encounter the impossibility, why? I assume that there are some impossibility, because I'm very I'm use the rationality of my language and my experiencing to assume that in this encounter there are some impossibility, because I don't think there are impossibility. This is and sometimes there are such strong affirmative, and then maybe one way to produce with babies is try just stay with babies and participate with babies, and some things that I not supposed before. For me, this is very humanist, and that human and the rationality would be the powerful strategy to deal with the demands of the world, because I encounter the impossibility of knowing. For me, this is a very problematic, if you think in a post-qualitative and post-human way of thinking, and I don't know, just
Jane?
Just in response to that, really, I think that where they're coming from is this, this place of early childhood research, which is so steeped in particular sorts of discourses that fix the adult-child binary in place, and also for time immemorial have this idea that our objective, our purpose is to understand, is to seek to know, is to make sense of, and then following on from that is, once you know them, you can fix them, because there's this inherent idea that children are not fully formed, not fully able, so if we can know them, then we can fix them and make them more adult, more on the trajectory, on the road to the right way to be against normative expectations. So I had read that sentence not as them as a group of researchers coming from a humanist position, so much as challenging the way in which they're positioned as researchers in this kind of almost impossible place, because even if you come to the study of childhood philosophically with an openness, you're still contained and corralled and regulated in ways that you don't necessarily want to be, and sometimes you don't even aren't even conscious that that's happening. And so I think that's what for me, that was what was unfolding in this entry, was the contradictions, the complexities, the kind of being sort of sucked back into this space, even though you're trying to resist it, and being more open to not knowing and not needing to know. But there is nevertheless this kind of apparatus, this kind of framework that's historical and discursive and material around the child that does things to adults. So I didn't think, I suppose that was my kind of take of that particular entry and where they were coming from with that question.
And along with the discounting of any, whatever form it takes, any kind of knowing being with babies as having value beyond, in other areas of work, or practice or life, somehow this segregation of this being adult, being with baby, and the kind of little value that's given to the experience of being with baby, adds to that impossibility, perhaps, because it's not only, it's because somehow that knowledge or being with is not welcome elsewhere. It's got to be kept quiet and hidden and not shared. Don't dare disclose, that your breast milk is overflowing in the workplace, or, for example, try and keep it wrapped up. It isn't relevant.
I mean, there was something about what Zhao was saying, which sort of triggered something interesting about the being with, and to what extent the being with one entity over another entity is a problem in terms of humanism, or and then I was thinking of how a lot of talk of being with water, or being with crows, or being with rats, or that's a post-humanist thing to do. But being with babies, because babies are young humans, would be a problem in terms of humanism. And then I thought, but because the being with, in the way probably the what it is that you're being with, if you see these are as bounded entities in the world, in space and time, it's a different kind of ontology than when we talk about the being with as a whatever else it is, as a phenomenon, right? So then we read it as a phenomenon. So it's not like the object or the subject, either or of those two. Being with any materials, you could say it's the thing, that we're not with things, that we're not with. So if we read being with babies as a phenomenon, we actually not, and we are talking about babies, right? So we're talking about these lovely milky smelling in the neck, especially, creatures, not always the bums, but definitely the necks. But then there's also
Karin, just you say it doesn't matter to think about if we are in being with babies, or with being with a rock or a cloud or a ocean?
It's just what you were saying. It just sort of triggered. It's almost like being with, and then I was just like, yeah, it doesn't matter. But sort of visually, I see then all these da 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 da, and you have the rocks, and you've got humans, and you've got da da da. So some of them are not okay, and some of them are okay, and others are better than others. But it's only if you hold on to a particular ontology where you see them as things, as objects in space and time, or subjects, bounded entities, bodies in space and time. If, on the other hand, you see them as phenomena in the Baradian sense, something else is happening where the being with is a phenomenon. So, and in the being with, you yourself as a researcher are always already part of the phenomenon. And that also makes possible and impossible certain kinds of knowledge as a cutting together apart, as an agential cut, because it is acknowledging. So what you then need to do is that, okay, so what is it here, the technology and the Zoom and the research questions, and working at the university and working in England and working so all these paradigms of research. And so then what you very I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but it just suddenly, when you were putting that, Zhao, it just became so much clearer for me what the problem is with a lot of or no, it's not the problem, it's the normativity, I think, in posthumanism. Maybe is it the normativity, or the being with this is so much more trendy, allowable, but what else can the being with baby tell us? It's not about the human here. If we're talking, it's a phenomenon. No, I'm probably not clear at all, but I'm getting very excited. Teresa? And then Marie?
Yeah, what I liked is the way that they talk about the extractiveness of a lot of qualitative field work, the way that being in the encounter is not enough. Actually, you want to come out with written field notes, photographs, interpretations, representations, etc. And in more sort of positivist research approaches, you'll be asked, so what is your object of study? It's like, what are you studying? And the thing about being in the encounter is that when you come out of it, you haven't learned anything about the baby
or moved.
You've learned or gathered data on the baby. You have been part of a phenomenon. You've been affected, and maybe you've affected, in and by this interaction of parts. So it's like, what does that mean then for research? And I suppose that's the challenge of, is it a methodology? How can you talk about, how can you plan it when you're trying to do it in a non-extractive way, and you're trying to be part of what you are inquiring about. So yeah, I like the way that in that passage they talk about the difference between the encounter versus the going in and collecting and leaving with the data. Yeah.
Viv? I know that Marie, I said Marie first, but Viv has got her hand up. Is that okay, Marie? Yeah, Viv?
I was just looking again at
Sorry, wait.
You're muted, I
Yeah.
think. You're muted.
Sorry, you can hear me now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just looking at the Deligny little fragment again and thinking that it was talking to what we just dealing with now, especially what Jane said. And it's where is it, on page 8, I think, where it says here in the middle, Deligny was a researcher mapping the daily lines of wandering of the children with whom he lived, but his purpose in research was not to constitute a body of knowledge, but to shape a gaze in order to change habits and allow for a common life. His method was resolutely indirect. I'm thinking about infant research through Deligny's method, the focus of which is not that of communication, but that of an entry into a resonance of gestures, which requires a focus on immanence, wandering along with, tracing rather than naming or interpreting. And then just above that, she says, I'm attempting an experiment, asking what might be produced if I approach a kind of research being with infants in ways that Deligny worked to create a living environment with the children with whose care he was charged, whose difference he had no interest in curing. And I just sort of thought that that spoke to what Jane was saying earlier, having no interest in curing.
Thank you. Thanks, Viv. Marie, you still want to come in?
Yeah, because that's just, thank you, that's just triggered. I think this idea of curing is related to the knowing. And when Joe, you said earlier about being with, is it being with and staying with the unknowing, which just reflecting on some of my interactions with new parents more recently than latterly, is that real world researchers and new parents who are spending a great deal of time trying to know and understand this little person who is unknowing, and the reluctance to leave your knowing cognizant self behind to enter an encounter that requires affective and embodied knowing, which seems quite distant from dominant discourses within the world today, because there's a great expectation that there is a knowing, a reason, or whatever for what is going on. So sort of shifting to that sort of unknowing and embodied, and I'll keep using the word knowing, and I don't want to. Nowing. I'll leave off the K in this.
That's nice, nowing.
Just to say one sentence, maybe if I not understand, but that I'm feeling peace of myself. Just maybe could be in this way, then, that the things are what you say, that when human and no human are in being with this phenomenon, it's possible to invent other relationalities. It's totally different about explain, understand, and impossibilities or possibilities.
Joanna?
Yeah, thank you. Gosh, I'm getting excited too. And thanks, Viv, for drawing attention to those two particular phrases and making the connections here. I love the resolute indirectness. That seems to me really, really good. But when you said about the no interest in curing, I was suddenly thinking about curing and its roots and other meanings of curing. And it is actually, it's quite strongly related, isn't it, to care, taking care of. So there's a beauty in that, you know, the treating medically and the curing, but we also use curing in English to describe preservation. And kind of like holding as it is, keeping as, you know, keeping fresh for consumptions later. So yeah, that it seems to me to be a potentially, you know, a lovely concept to walk in, walk with, or walk around in, or and I'm just thinking also about what Marie was saying about, you know, the new parent and the new researcher and the kind of sense of being buffeted in the experience that you know, the sheer unmanageability of it and the vulnerability that it exposes.
Might this be a good moment to say that people are just gonna do some writing? Or yeah, we've been thinking and talking together, and there seems to be a really nice pause and lots of amazing thoughts. So what I could do is just stop the recording, and then we're just gonna do what we want to do, or you might also want to go for a walk and see you at or swim, and I'll see you at 4 o'clock our time. And if you are gone, then I won't take offense, but I will leave the Zoom room open. Okay, so thank you for this. See you later.